Hello, my name is Hannah Tasker and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you a quick tour of our allotment to show you what's happening in March. I thought I'd start March's tour here in our herb section of our allotment. Now I've given it a bit of a tidy up, and one of the things I touched upon last tour was this plant here, which is Angelica. Now, I'm really excited that the Angelica plant survived because there's lots of things I want to use it for this year. One of the things I want to do is I want to use the root to flavour some gins. Angelica root is actually used to flavour absinthe, ouzo and gins, so I want to try infusing some alcohol. Hiya, talking to myself. I want to flavour some alcohol using the Angelica root. The other thing that you can do is you can use the stalks in a very similar way to celery, and they can be candied as well. They're a traditional candied treat of the 17th century, but the leaves are edible too. You can use the leaves in stews and soups, and also the seeds. The seeds can have a very similar flavour to anise and fennel, so I'm really excited to try them all. Apparently the part that has the most flavour is the stem and the roots, so we'll see how that goes. Another thing that I uncovered this month that I didn't know I'd survived was this plant here. Now it's growing in a similar way to the Angelica, and it has actually tiny paint splodges, or what look like tiny paint splodges on the leaves, and that's how you can tell it's Sweet Cicely. It's very distinctive, a part of this species. Both of these plants are a member of the Apiaceae family. I think I've pronounced that properly. But the most distinctive thing about the Sweet Cicely is that it tastes of aniseed. It's a really strong taste of aniseed. It's really nice. Now, in a similar way to the Angelica, it can be used in lots and lots of ways. People use the roots, the stems, the leaves, and I'm really excited to see if we can use this in some flavouring in some dishes this season. Herbalists are said to think this is a very overlooked herb because it's actually quite sweet, and it's a very healthy way to sweeten dishes, so I'm looking forward to trying that out too. So taking you on a really quick tour of the herb bed. At the back in the corner is the rhubarb, which we're still forcing under the old compost bin, and then the plants at the back, there are self-seeded borage, which I'm going to see if any of them take off. I'll probably just leave one because borage does get quite big. Coming towards the front with some chives, and then in the container that's sunk into the floor is some lemon balm. Across from that, I'm not really sure what that is anymore. I'm going to wait till it comes back to see. This is some more thyme, and I think there's mint in that tub. I'm not sure if that's going to come back yet, but mint's quite resilient, so it may yet. This I moved from the last plot tour. That's what was hiding the Sweet Cicely. This is my rosemary bush. I didn't realise how big it would get. Last year I just stuck everything in, so I've given it a little bit more room. Then we have the Sweet Cicely and the Angelica. Coming across, we've got two more sets of chives. That's Honesty plant, which I'm growing more for the flowers for the bees and for the seed pods. The seed pods are beautiful. Next to that is my sage, and the sage, I'm not sure it's going to make a comeback. It was pineapple sage and it was beautiful. It had the most beautiful flowers. I'm not sure that's going to come back, so I might have to see if I can find some more for this year. And the final thing at the moment is some wild garlic hiding down there, and a rogue cornflower. And this is a new archway for this year. Now this is one of the things I'm most looking forward to seeing. I've built this arch just to give me an idea of the height and the width, but actually I'm going to have an archway running down the entire length of the entire width, sorry, of the plot. So right the way from this fence to the other fence, with a gap in the middle of the path. And I'm going to grow all my peas and beans up this archway this year. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what my pea and bean tunnel looks like. So this is the top section of my plot, and it runs from where the archway will be, and there's 6 beds running to the top. Now this is where all the fruit is that we've seen. There's the herb bed across the very back, the compost bins, and then there's the rhubarb, the raspberries, 2 beds of strawberries, and there's just 1 empty bed left to plant in this section, because the rest of it's already taken with fruit. The bed that's the current garlic bed will eventually be asparagus. I've got some asparagus seeds to sow this year, so the back section will pretty much all be permanent, perennial fruit and vegetables. So this is what's happening at the top end of the plot. This is the garlic. It's doing really well. It's putting on lots of fresh green growth, and it's looking really healthy now. This is my flower border. The snowdrops have died back now, but we have some daffs in full bloom and some which are about to bloom, and lots of tulips. I just can't wait for the tulips to come through. This is a new addition for this year. It's a josterberry, and it's a cross between a blackcurrant and a gooseberry. This is the rhubarb that I expected to put on the most growth. This is the early variety. It's called Simply Early. And yeah, I really expected this one to make a move first, but it hasn't. Maybe next year. So this is my row of purple sprouting broccoli, and this is pretty much the only crop that's left in the allotment at the moment. The leeks were the only other thing that we had, and I've harvested the rest of the leeks and put them in the freezer. They were starting to go to seed, and we actually ate the flower scapes in some chicken fajitas, and they were absolutely delicious. In my opinion, definitely the best part of the leek plants, so definitely don't waste them, they're beautiful. These plants I didn't net. Last month I said that I was going to net the plants, but I didn't. I don't mind sharing a little bit with the birds. Some of the plants are looking a lot more healthy than other ones, but we're still starting to get harvest from them now. And I don't know if you can see, but these are actually in the pathway this year. Now, the reason I didn't have much in the allotment over winter is that I wanted to rework my plot. Last year I had really big vegetable beds, and I found I was walking on them a lot, and it just didn't work for me, so I wanted to try something different this year. Most of these beds are now 1.2 metres wide. And just as it's happened, the broccoli is right in the middle of the pathway, so when they're harvested I will grass that path, I think. So this is the midsection of my plot, and there's 12 beds, 6 either side. This is where I've currently got my purple sprouting broccoli that's growing in the pathway. There's some onions further up, and there's some carrots that I have sown yesterday to see if they come through. The only difference at this side of the plot is that I wanted to line up the beds with the gap in the pathway. So what I've done is I've created a small flower border just at the edge of this bed, and what I'm going to do is fill that with some gladioli this year, I think, and some other flowers just to encourage the wildlife. To make the very most of my space, I'm going to be planting at the end of my smaller paths, and I have 2 soft fruit plants here. One of these is a tayberry and one of them is a loganberry. I've mixed these up, so I'm not sure which one's which, but both varieties are a cross between a blackberry and a raspberry. Hopefully I'll be able to tell the difference when they fruit, because one's meant to be a little less sharp than the other variety. And this is an oxeye daisy, I think, which survived the winter in my compost bin, and I think if he survived that long, he deserves another chance. So this is my blackberry. It's a variety called Reuben, and it's special for quite a few reasons. It's a primocane, which means it bears fruit on new stems and crops in its first year, a bit like an autumn fruiting raspberry. It's also much more upright than a traditional blackberry, which makes training and picking the fruit much easier, and the fruits are bigger and the flowers are prettier than that of most other blackberries. It's not quite thornless, it still does have some prickly stems, but the mature stems have fewer thorns. So this is the bottom section of my plot, and I've got 2 regular beds each side of the path, and then I have orchard row, which is my row of 4 dwarf fruit trees, before I come down to my shed, my no-dig salad bed, and the wildlife and pond area, and just to the side I've got the container with the Jerusalem artichokes as well. I'm so pleased to see these dwarf fruit trees come back into bud, because I planted these as bare root trees back in November, and by the end of December the bottom end of the plot had flooded and these sat underwater for about 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm really pleased that 3 out of the 4 of them are starting to bud. There's one that isn't, that's the Victoria plum tree, and I think I'm just going to have to keep my fingers crossed and see what happens with that one this year. So this is the wildlife section of my plot. It measures just over 3 metres by just over 4 metres, I think, and I started digging this pond out in spring last year. I didn't get round to finishing it, I didn't get round to finish any of this area, so the first thing on the list to do is to finish the pond. Now I did put a slope in the pond, but I want a more gradual slope for the insects and frogs to get out of the pond should anything get stuck in there. So that's the first job, and then I will cut the pond liner down to size, and eventually it will be sort of a pear shape here. Now there are lots of flowers already here that are just starting to spring back into life now that spring's here. The one thing that didn't make it was the honesty, which is just in that corner. The one down in the herb border is definitely looking a lot more alive. There is a few new additions as well. This pampas grass is new, there's 2 of them, one's pink and one's white, and they're new additions for this year, so it'll be interesting to see how they go. I thought that they would provide some cover and some shade for the frogs, so that was the idea behind the pampas grass. There is already some other grass. There's some Carex Evergold, which is looking beautiful, some oxeye daisies at the back there, some self-seeded lupin, some self-seeded calendula. There should be some lilies across this border, some lavender plants which are due to be moved. I'm going to have a little lavender edge in front of the shed, so they're going to move in front of the shed very soon. The barrels at the back are to make a water collection system. I do have guttering on my shed, but it doesn't feed into anything at the moment, so the plan is to set up a water collection system with at least 3 of the 4 barrels that I have across the back of the plot at the moment. And I've got lots of flowers and seeds at home, some that I've sown, some that are yet to sow, that will go into this pond area to make it a really wild and interesting place for the animals and for the pollinators this season. I also have to do some tidying. Since I cut the edges and edged the path, there's all the edgings. This is the last part of the plot that I haven't cleared. I have cleared some of the other edging to the side of to the back of the plot there, and I'll just wait till the grass dies down and I can use that soil again, hopefully next year. And yeah, I just can't wait to see what it looks like in summer when everything's in full bloom. Now, this bamboo cane is marking out where my mulberry tree is. Now, at the moment it just looks like a stick, but I'm hoping in a few years' time it will be producing lots of yummy fruit for us. So at the other side of the path from the pond is my shed, and this is a new bed for this year. Now, I'm going to try this bed this year as a no-dig bed, so I've lined it with cardboard and topped it with some homemade compost and shop-bought compost. And this bed is actually the shadiest part of the plot during the morning, so I think this is the best bed to have my salad crops. So I'm going to start with things like lettuce and peas for shoots and things like that, so because they need a little bit more shade, so hopefully they'll thrive here because the rest of the plot is pretty much full sun. This is me edging the path. Firstly, I used a lawn edging tool to just go down the full length of the pathway because the spades are very slightly curved, so you get a much better straight edge with a lawn edging tool. And once I'd completed the edging, I used my spade to take away the excess turf. Just to try and show you the difference it makes between having the path edged and having it not edged. The main path I have edged, but this path leading to the Jerusalem artichokes have yet to edge, and it looks a lot messier. And so a lot's changed on the plot this month. I think the biggest difference has been cutting the grass for the first time and edging the path. All of a sudden it feels a lot more structured. I've marked out the beds, and having smaller beds has made a massive difference to me mentally, because obviously the space is the same size, nothing's changed dimensionally, but just having smaller beds makes it feel much more manageable than it did last year. Even though the main plot has 28 regular sized beds, and then we've got the orchard and the wildlife area and the new no dig cellar bed on top of that, so it is quite a big space, but having smaller beds for me makes it feel so much more manageable. I'm hoping as well that's the last time we see the plot looking quite so bare. I've got big plans for next year, for having crops in over the winter and for having cover crops too on areas of the ground just to protect the soil a little bit. Now on my allotment site, I think that a lot of my neighbours think I'm absolutely crazy for having paths in my allotment. A lot of people on my site are very traditional allotmenteers. They rotate their entire plots and they grow in big long rows. They don't do paths. So I'm really the odd one out down here, but for me it's a much more manageable way of gardening. So I'm happy with what we're doing, but I think my paths on top of talking to myself when I'm talking to the camera, yeah, it's been a bit more of a challenge this month, I have to admit, because last month and the month before it was winter, so there wasn't anyone down here, so I kind of got away with talking to myself a little bit more than what I have done this month, and let's just say I've had my fair share of people picking on me, so we'll just see how it goes. I don't mind. I get on really well with the people down here. They're all a really nice bunch, and I'm actually helping to run the allotment shop as well, so I'm getting to know more people. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. That's about it for the plot tour, but I really hope to see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.